Jovian, who signed a peace treaty that amounted to pure humiliation. Rome surrendered 5 entire provinces and strategic fortresses and withdrew broken-winged. Persia had proven once again that its land was a graveyard for anyone foolish enough to enter it with arrogance, and that Shapur, Lord of the Shoulders, was a wall that only death could pass through. Rome had tried brute force and failed. It had tried deep invasion and failed. And still, the conflict kept boiling. By the 6th century, this was no longer just military brawn. It had become a chess game played across the map of the world. The Roman Emperor Justinian was consumed with his wars in Italy and Africa, so he needed to buy peace from Persia at any price. His bad luck? He was dealing with Khosrow I Anushirvan, a king who combined the cunning of a fox with the strength of a lion. Khosrow agreed to a treaty they called the Eternal Peace in 532 CE, on the condition that Rome pay Persia 11,000 pounds of gold. Rome paid, quietly, to focus on the West, and Persia used the gold to build a terrifying army. But the peace was only the calm before the storm. In 530 CE, one of the greatest tactical battles in history took place. The brilliant young Roman general Belisarius, still practically a boy, faced a Persian army twice the size of his own. Belisarius made an incredibly bold move. He dug deep trenches in a U-shape in front of his lines, specifically to block the Persian cataphract cavalry from trampling his infantry. When the overconfident Persians attacked, they fell straight into the trench trap, and Belisarius struck from the flanks in an encircling maneuver that crushed the heart of the Persian army. This was the moment Rome proved it could beat Persia at its own military game, not just through numbers. Khosrow Anushirvan wasn't one to let an insult slide. In 540 CE, taking advantage of Belisarius's absence, he suddenly struck Antioch, the jewel of the Roman East. Roughly 30,000 people, deporting them to Iraq, where he built them a brand new city right next to his own capital and named it Khosrow's Antioch. The city was a replica of the original. Same streets, same houses, same churches. So its residents would live there and feel that the Persian king was their true master, one who could build and destroy in the blink of an eye. The war continued for another 20 years in the region of Lazica, modern Georgia, turning into a filthy war of attrition in the mountains and forests. Both Rome and Persia lost thousands of soldiers and mountains of gold, and plague began gnawing at both sides. Eventually, both sat down and signed another 50-year peace treaty, with Rome resuming its annual tribute in gold. But in truth, this war marked the beginning of the end. Treasuries emptied, armies exhausted, and both empires now stood like two giants leaning on each other just to stay upright. Khosrow Anushirvan and Justinian both eventually died, leaving their heirs empires stretched to the breaking point. And what came next left no room for reason at all. The final, catastrophic grinder was about to begin. In 602 CE, the volcano erupted. Roman Emperor Maurice was killed in a bloody coup, and Persian King Khosrow II Parviz found the pretext he'd been waiting for to erase Rome from the map entirely. This time, Khosrow wasn't looking to clip Rome's wings, he wanted to slaughter the Byzantine Empire outright. He sent his monster generals, Sharbaraz and Shahin, and unleashed a Persian storm that swallowed everything in its path. Within a few short years, Persia took Antioch and Damascus, and in 614 CE, reached Jerusalem itself. The city held out for 21 days, under a barrage of stone and fire. And when Persia finally broke through, a massacre followed. Historians estimate as many as 60,000 people killed. But the blow that truly shook the entire Christian world wasn't the death toll. It was the theft of the true cross, Rome's holiest relic, which Persia carried off as a prisoner to their capital, Ctesiphon. Persia then pushed on and took Egypt in 619 CE, putting the granary of the ancient world into Khosrow's hands. Rome was now a corpse still twitching. Persia pressed from the east, Berbers pressed from the west, and Khosrow sent a message to Heraclius that read, "I am the god of the earth, and you are a worthless slave. Do not imagine you will escape my hand." In this darkest moment, everyone in Mecca gloated over the Muslims, since Rome, the people of the book, had just been crushed by the fire-worshipping Persians. Then came the revelation, verses that shook the mountains. The Romans have been defeated, but they, after their defeat, will overcome within a few years, and that day the believers will rejoice. At the time, this prophecy sounded like a logical impossibility. Rome had no army left, no money left, and Persia stood at Chalcedon, directly across from Constantinople. Every military calculation said Rome was finished. But the prophecy was clear and unambiguous. Rome would return. This is where Heraclius stepped in. This man did the impossible. He melted down church treasures and gave up the comforts of the palace, making a suicidal decision. Instead of defending my capital, I will go strike Khosrow in his own home. Heraclius circled his army behind the mountains of Armenia and the Caucasus and drove straight into the Persian heartland, systematically destroying their fire temples, one after another. Khosrow, who thought himself a god, found Heraclius burning his palaces in Dastagerd. This was the start of an unimaginable historical comeback, and the countdown began. The prophecy was starting to come true. Heraclius transformed from a broken emperor into an avenging storm. But would Khosrow simply accept it? Would Persia's army let Heraclius reach the capital? While Khosrow II sat in his palace savoring his illusory victories, Heraclius was working a military miracle, not fighting to defend, but fighting to annihilate. In December 627 CE, the avenging Roman army clashed with the Persian army at the Battle of Nineveh. Khosrow sent his best general, Rahazad, with a massive force to stop Heraclius. Fog blanketed the field and the cold was bitter, but Roman hearts burned with the fire of vengeance, seeking to reclaim their cross and their honor. The battle opened with a legendary duel. The Persian commander Rahazad rode out and challenged Heraclius to single combat. In a bold, near-suicidal move, Heraclius accepted, met him face to face, and with one legendary sword strike, beheaded the Persian commander in front of his own army. The battle raged for 11 straight hours of relentless slaughter, and ended in the total destruction of the Persian army. Heraclius didn't stop there. He pressed on all the way to Khosrow's palace at Dastagerd, and burned it to the ground. Khosrow fled like a rat, and his own son, Shero, turned against him and had him killed in prison. And so, exactly as the Quran had foretold, within a few years, Rome overcame and reclaimed its place as master of the world. In 630 CE, Heraclius entered Jerusalem in a legendary ceremony, carrying the true cross on his own shoulders, walking barefoot, and returning it to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The whole world was stunned. How had the Roman corpse risen again? And how had the once dominant Persian Empire fallen so suddenly? This was the exact moment the prophecy of Surat ar-Rum was fulfilled to the letter, before the eyes of believers and skeptics alike in Mecca. But here's the real truth. This victory tasted of ashes.
Rome ended up with empty treasuries and an exhausted army. Persia collapsed into a civil war that ground down whatever remained. And neither side realized, whether celebrating or mourning, that a new storm was forming in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula y Europe. Muslim armies, about to end the story of these two giants for good. Heraclius had won the war, reclaimed the cross, and fulfilled the prophecy. But was that enough to keep the empire alive? Soon we'd see just how brief and bitter that triumph really was. As Heraclius left Syria for the last time, looking back, he spoke his famous, mournful words, "Farewell, a long farewell, to Syria, my fair province. Thou art an infidel's now. Peace be with you, O Syria y Euro, what a beautiful land you are for the enemy." Ask any military historian how it happened, and they'll tell you, the Muslims revolutionized the art of war. Rome and Persia had both relied on heavy formations while Euro the Roman soldier weighed down in iron, the Persian cataphract loaded with armor. These armies were essentially tanks while Euro powerful, but painfully slow, dependent on logistics, supply lines, and massive encampments. The Muslims, led by brilliant commanders like Khalid ibn al-Walid and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, flipped the table entirely with speed and shock tactics. At Yarmouk, Rome deployed a massive force while Euro roughly 200,000 soldiers, chained together so none could flee. Khalid ibn al-Walid, with sheer tactical genius, used mobility instead while Euro dividing his forces into fast-moving units and wearing the Romans down with maneuver after maneuver, until he found the gap between their infantry and cavalry. Khalid drove his cavalry through that gap like a scalpel through a wound, cutting the Roman horsemen off from their infantry and pinning them into a deep ravine while Euro the valley of Rakad. Weighed down by heavy armor, the Romans had nowhere to run and fell by the thousands into the ravine. Heraclius, who had just been celebrating his triumph over Persia, watched a lifetime's dream evaporate in 6 days, crying out his famous farewell as he abandoned Syria forever. On the Persian front, it was an entirely different kind of epic. At Qadisiyah in 636 CE, Persia brought out war elephants to terrify the Arab horses.
But the Muslims, with sharp battlefield instinct, began targeting the elephants' eyes with arrows and cutting the straps of the platforms mounted on their backs. Blinded and panicked, the elephants turned and trampled the Persian army itself. The Persian commander Rustam sat on a golden throne under a canopy, but when he saw his army collapsing, he tried to flee. A Muslim soldier caught and killed him, then shouted across the battlefield, "I have killed Rustam, by the Lord of the Kaaba!" That moment marked the end of Sassanid pride. The crown fell, and Persia lost its capital, Ctesiphon, along with all its treasures. King Yazdijir III fled until he was finally killed in Merv, and the fire of the Magi, which hadn't gone out in thousands of years, was extinguished for good. The real secret of the Muslim success was faith and justice. The people living under Persian and Roman rule had been suffocating under taxes and religious persecution. When they saw Muslims offering protection in exchange for a modest tax and justice in place of oppression, they opened their city gates willingly. The Muslims weren't fighting to plunder gold, they were fighting to free people from servitude to one another. This is exactly why Khalid ibn al-Walid sent his famous message to the Persian commanders, "I have brought you a people who love death as you love life." That single sentence hit harder than 1,000 catapults. It shattered the morale of armies who, less than a decade earlier, believed they were invincible. In under 10 years, a map that had been drawn and redrawn in Persian and Roman blood for 700 years was erased and rewritten in the language of Arabic. Empires that once rivaled the stars in the sky became nothing more than pages in history books. If you ever ask yourself why the conflict between Iran and the West never seems to end, here's the answer. We're not watching a new fight break out. We're watching the newest episode of a series that began 2,000 years ago, Persia and Rome. History doesn't repeat itself word for word, but it repeats its rhythm. When you break down the causes of the ancient Persian-Roman wars, you find the exact same forces still driving the Iran-America conflict today. Economics, the choke points. Back then, Persia and Rome ground each other down fighting for control of the Silk Road and trade corridors. Today, it's the same fight under different names. The Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, These are the Silk Road of our era. Iran, heir to Persia, knows its power lies in controlling a global energy artery, and America, heir to Rome's role as the great Western power, is determined to keep that artery open on its own terms. Naval dominance over these waterways is simply the modern version of the fight over the trade caravans that once bankrupted both Caesars and Shahs. Legitimacy and the sacred. The Persian-Roman Wars were ideological wars, the cross against the sacred fire. Today's conflict wears religious and philosophical packaging too. Iran moves from a stance of exporting the revolution and protecting the oppressed with its own religious worldview. America moves from a stance of spreading democracy and the values of the free world. Each side sees itself as holding absolute truth and the other as an axis of evil, And that's exactly what makes political compromise so fragile, because each side arms its own people with an ideology that leaves no room for concession, much like Justinian and Anushirvan once did. Shadow Wars, Proxies. The most important thread connecting past and present is the proxy game. Just as Persia and Rome once used the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids as human shields and long-reach swords, Iran today has its axis of resistance in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, while America has its alliances and military bases. Proxy warfare is the defining signature of the Iran-West rivalry, Either side wants a full-scale war that burns everything to the ground. The way the 20-year war between Khosrow and Heraclius nearly did. So instead, they keep bleeding each other on other people's land, through other people's hands, just to stay dominant without paying the price at the gates of their own capitals. The lesson history teaches us is this: attrition is what brings down giants. Persia and Rome kept fighting until a third force, the Muslims, emerged and wiped them both off the map. Today, the whole world watches the Iran-America standoff and asks the same question: will they keep grinding each other down until some new third power, China? Perhaps rises to inherit what's left? History tells us that arrogance and prolonged stubbornness in open-ended wars is slow suicide. The weapons have changed from swords and spears to intercontinental missiles, but greed and geography never lie. Persia and Rome are long gone, but the ancient grudge remains. We don't tell history to entertain you. We tell it so that when you open the news today and see what's happening in the region, you understand. You're watching a scene that was staged 2,000 years ago, playing out again. History has no ending. It's made of circles, and the wise are the ones who read the past, so they don't become its victim in the future.
History remembers the victors. We remember the truth. Thank you for watching. Like this video, subscribe to Thoughts, and activate the notification bell to be the first to witness every new documentary. Because every ending is only the beginning of another untold story. We'll see you in the next chapter.